And joining us tonight is David Kennedy. David's one of the driving forces behind NHRA storytelling, digital media, and fan engagement. From his days leading Hot Rod magazine to helping shape how millions of fans experience NHRA today, David takes us behind the scenes of the fastest motorsport on earth. David Kennedy, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Bill. John, thanks for having me tonight. Thanks to your audience for tuning in.
Awesome. We're really looking forward to our conversation. Let's jump right into it, David. You've had a front row seat to the evolution of drag racing media, from leading Hot Rod magazine to helping shape NHRA's digital presence. What excites you most about where the sport is headed today?
Well, I come from a storyteller background, right? Most of the audience probably knows that NHRA, National Hot Rod Association, is born out of Hot Rod magazine. It's born from story. That's where I'm coming from. And for the last 26 years, I've been in California working for car magazines and truck magazines that Wally was once part of. So the idea of the opportunity to tell those stories and to see how, and we'll kind of get into this tonight. You come from a stats world where the performance, the news, the excitement. Early on, that's all that could be known. And now think of all the stories, all of the personalities, all the locations. And it's almost a crippling amount of story where every one of these people is fascinating. Every one of them has an intriguing background. Every one of them has talents and capabilities. Controversy, there's drama, all of them are exciting. So take your pick. I have yet to meet a boring person in drag racing. That's the bottom line.
Right. Yeah, holy cow. If you can't find a story, among all the hundreds of racers and then all the support personnel, every one of
Yeah.
them has their own story, and it's unbelievable. Well,
Yep.
man, it's fantastic. Well, you've covered like thousands of races and interviewed some of the biggest names in motorsports. Is there one race, one run, or one story that still gives you goosebumps when you think about it?
Well, again, I think just seeing how they all kind of tie in together, right? So, back to the earliest days, maybe I'll start with this one. How do you get into the NHRA? How do you start to participate? Was always kind of a fascinating thing because it's 75 years old this year, and I became aware of it. I saw the logo, I saw the oval, and I thought I want to be part of that. How do you get in? And the short answer, particularly when I was a kid, is you had to go to a race. Once you got to a race, then you can get it. Now you can find us on social media and online, YouTube like this, and follow a path and get in. But early on, you kind of had to go. So I was really intrigued by this idea. What was the Hot Rod Association? And it seemed like it was even more than drag racing. And there was layers. And who was this guy Wally? And what was the statue, the trophy? Who are these? Who was? Everybody had a nickname, right? It was Don Garlitz, Don Perdome, maybe Don Schumacher. And other people not named Don. Everybody was a personality and had cars and speed and looked good. So I think for me, just realizing the story to get into it, the story of how it began, the story of what was important, and maybe for the 75th, the thing that's really intriguing me, I wear NHRA on my chest here. I come from Hot Rod magazine, so the H and R were important to me when I got here, the Hot Rod part. I realize it's probably the association, the A, that's the important part. Again, like this. How do you have success in a marketplace, in a group where everybody can come in here and succeed? Everybody can tell stories. So first NHRA event, first NHRA track I went to was Englishtown for not a national event. And there I met Shirley Muldowney, who I had never met anyone that competitive in my entire life, and maybe I never have. Still,
Yeah, right.
Don Garlitz was there, and he was charming, and he was knowledgeable, and he was a car guy that was doing stuff for ESPN. And I thought, how is this guy good at building cars, designing cars, driving cars, talking about cars, racing cars? Is this guy bad at anything? And I was immediately for years, I just kind of tried to struggle with, what is he not good at? And again, I all these years later, I still get to interact with him now on a personal level. He's the kind of guy that text messages you, and I still get to find the thing that he's not good at. So probably Don Garlitz's lifetime achievement, lifetime contribution, lifetime ability to still do it. That's probably my favorite, and I think that that's something probably is everybody's favorite. Don Perdome, a guy that before I met him probably was hard to know. And now he's the kind of guy where, I think he's got a different relationship with the sport and probably the one that we would all want to have. He's not burnt out. It's gotten even more enriched for him. So those are the kinds of ones I like. The long arc, the long collaboration, the one that you get gripped as a young age, And like you two gentlemen, it never lets you go. It's never going to let you go.
That's true. It's it's funny that our tagline here on the show is we turn heroes into pals. And it's I'm a kid. Or I'm 67 now, but I've been since maybe 10. I was reading the mags on the ma in the drugstore back then, and couldn't afford the magazines, but I would flip through them, and then they'd chase me out. Build a couple model cars later, and I built the Bruce. I share this all the time, and I see Bruce Larson all the time. But I built the model of his 70 Camaro. I was about 12, I guess, and I thought I was Bruce Larson, man. Man, this is my man here. And to get to know these guys in later years, and they're just good folks, and they just enjoy racing, and they still come out there. I saw Bruce and his friend Bill, who goes back to high school with him. He's been with him that long. Just a couple weeks ago in Hagerstown, and they're amazing, and to get to interact with these folks, and all the folks you just mentioned, I've been proud to have them on the show and to chat and talk on the phone over the years. It is truly a dream come true, but it's a funny it's a funny history, right? There's not I can barely remember not knowing all these names, right? Either
Yeah.
through the magazines like Hot Rod and others, and or through through building the cars and stuff. And it's there's a what I really enjoy about what you do, David, and others in that space is, I was there was no way for me to get to the drags at that age, right? And then it wasn't until my mid-teens when I finally started actually going. So there's an entire world here and all the California stuff happening. There's an entire world brought to fans then through those magazines, but now through social media, and the world's just blown wide open. But it's really, really been great to be part of the family for all this time and all those
You know,
amazing racers.
and again, I think this long format conversation where you can tell those stories, and again, there'll be something that we're going to dip into, and it'll pique our interest, and we'll go down that path and take
Mhm.
people with us. Just recently, Matty Gordon, again, a new phenomenon story with an NHRA. And at Gator Nationals this year, first round, I think first round win at Gator Nationals, and the crowd, the starting line, just cheering for her.
Mhm.
And a person that was at the starting line, he said, I was here for every one of the Force girls' first race.
Mhm.
I don't ever remember them getting a cheer like that. And it was kind of eye-opening. Now, I never went back to look and see if that's true. I have no idea, but just that idea, that feeling. And then, now more recently, after a first win, I sent a text to Prudhomme. And I realized that, at some point, Prudhomme saw in Ron Capps what Ron Capps saw in Matty Gordon.
Right.
And it's the same arc all over again. And maybe someday Matty Gordon's going to see something in a future racer that is as yet unborn,
Right.
and she'll see it in her or him, and it keeps that cycle going. And whatever that is, those people can see it, and then we get to benefit from it because it wasn't obvious. And then you just see it taking off like a rocket, and then you
Mhm.
can't deny it.
She's a force of nature, and you can't not like her. I mean, it's just one of those so genuine and so excited to be, part of it, and such a hard worker, and just so genuinely, I mean, truly sweet and nice. And we had her on the show mid last year, and where she had just found out about the Caps deal. And so those, to this day, those little shorts are blowing up. We take each one of the shows and we make a number of shorts out of them, and you can't not like her. She's just amazing.
Well, and I mean, we could talk about that too, because when you watch her, what is it about her? And it's that authenticity, that just joy. Again, that in that first round one interview, she's covering her mouth, almost like she's trying to contain herself and the excitement. And she's looking around, and she's kind of tossing her hand like this. And I said, geez, it seems really familiar. And I thought, oh, it's like an early John Force interview where it's so much joy, it's so much enthusiasm that it was bursting out of both of them.
Hmm.
And again, it's real. Again, and everyone that's watching the show, you meet everyone in the Gordon family is a phenomenal person. Um, I met her grandfather, who was delivering Blaine Johnson's memorial kind of second car to the NHRA Museum in Pomona. And I got there early, and I think it's Mike Gordon.
Yeah.
There's a truck trailer out front. I went up. I have a CDL, so I make nice to the truck driver. He said, "Well, actually, I'm Doug Gordon's dad. We have this truck and trailer, and we brought the car down for Alan because Alan doesn't have a semi." And I thought, he said, get in the truck. And all of a sudden I immediately liked him. And we had to drive in past security and we had to talk our way in and he charmed us through. And I thought, oh, I like everything about this guy. And then I met Doug Gordon. I thought, oh, I like everything about this guy. And again, the capabilities, you see these people at distance, you see them in the car, you see the success, but then when you meet them one on one, you think they can't possibly be as nice as you see them on TV. And then you realize, oh no, they're nicer. And so then when I finally met Maddie, I thought, oh, of course she's amazing because she's just grown up, she's normalized that. So
Right.
that level of performance, that level of enthusiasm, I don't know how you compete against that. If you don't have that, all that is advantage in today's modern motorsports. She loves it. It's her truth. And again, people like us, we get to tell those stories.
Hmm. I love it. You mentioned Mike, and he's more than just Doug's dad. I mean, Mike is on the drag list himself. He a very competitive, top alcohol funny car racer, and that. What I get to see over
Yeah.
the decades is and we updated him every single year, and so I see the folks through the generations on the drag racing list. Many families that just go on and on. And so it's pretty cool.
Well, maybe educate me on this because again, I grew up probably in a generation where I started to get the stories and it was long form, and I came from the car magazine side. I was aware of National Dragster
Hmm.
being a weekly, but the idea of getting it, I didn't know drag racers. I knew some car people, but they weren't at that level yet. And then the idea of these box scores and these stats, the idea of national records, personal records. Again, these are things that you could wrap your mind around, almost like reading of a fiction. You could
Hmm.
fill in the blanks in the story. Maybe tell me a little bit about this. Does that resonate with you where you
Sure.
just need to see some ETs and some speeds and know the track and you could almost envision it, right? Almost hear it. Is that
Exactly.
how it felt?
Well, for me, and I'm making this a Bill Pratt interview. I'm sorry, but I mean, I came in through the math. I came in through the numbers. In addition to loving the colors and the flames and the pretty cards in the magazines. But what really fascinated me, and this goes back to when I was like 14 and had my first Texas Instruments or some knockoff version of it. I was actually working the math. And I was basically doing algebra before I had learned it in school. I'm like, okay, so you got a distance, you got an ET, you got a speed. How's that all work? And I sort of worked it out in my little noggin, and it turned out to be simple algebra. The distance divided by speed or ET, speed equals ET, or vice versa. But then I really started getting into it and just really want to understand that. And I was doing like horsepower estimations and stuff based on the performance. It's really funny. That's what brought me in. And then of course, what I actually did, this is crazy. I built a computer game in the when was it? The early 80s, mid 80s, when DOS was out there, if you ever saw a DOS computer. So I basically built a database in a computer game where I could go race as a fake against any one of my stars at the real tracks, against the real guys and gals with the real ETs and speeds. And that's the thing. And I did get it, and I built it and sold it for like 20 years, and then I really need to bring it back out because it was kind of fun. But that was got what led to Draglist. I'm like, holy cow, I'll bet people would pay just to get this information that I'm gathering to build this little drag racing game. And so that's what kind of got me into it. I was fascinated by it. And what I actually do is, I mean, all the numbers, all the ETs and everything, it all works in with the combinations. I often say it's kind of like drag racing. It's kind of like golf in one way, in that it's simple, right? Just mash it and go, and you win or you lose. Or well, it's simple, right? Put that little ball in the hole, right? Easy, no problem, right? Well, look at all the permutations that one could take to get that done and to get that done well. Same thing with drag racing, through all the mechanical capabilities, all the combinations, all of the different, driving styles. It's all seems simple, but it's certainly not. And I love to sort of, as I'm announcing an event, and I've had the opportunity to do some announcing, I like create the story in my head, and I'm trying to take people on a story that day. And I know the announcers on TV do as well. You kind of see what's happening, and in the live drama, you kind of take them through the end zone, the end state, and then often I would like write the story and send it to National Dragster afterwards. So, um, Well, that gets in a little bit later, but I'm just, yeah, I was fascinated by the numbers. And David, John is indicating he's got something for us. What do you have, John?
Yes, sorry to interrupt. This is a great interview, but we've asked for BP to turn his volume up if possible.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then we'll keep on going. But
Sure.
that's my way in. So, I guess there are many different ways to become a fan and to get engaged in. Um, so that's kind of my story.
Well, and again, the math as I look at this, so coming from a car magazine side where we get 31 days to tell a story, sometimes at shortest would get 28 days, you kind of live in it and feel it. And then at some point you start to tell stories about things that you're doing. And then coming back to this idea of these racers are stories unto themselves. They live it. Prudhomme is a movie, he's a book, he's Garlitz is a movie, a book. There are multiple movies, there are multiple books. There's so much happening, and kind of coming down to this bottom line. This last year, as I spent time reflecting on this, dedicated to safety. We talked earlier before we came on here with the group. Early logo of NHRA is dedicated to safety, and I thought that's not really that sexy. This is a speed organization. How could we be dedicated? Maybe he really meant dedicated to speed, and then they edited that out. Here in Los Angeles, here in California, where NHRA got its launch, California Highway Patrol, state troopers for some people watching, their logo is something like dedicated to safety. And I thought, oh, I see what Wally's done here. This is, again, for people not paying attention to the earliest days, this wasn't born as a drag racing association. It was born as a association of car clubs, just on a national scale. So you have local car clubs, and their power and their utility only scaled to the number of people they could speak to. So Wally wanted to use a national hot rod association to connect coast to coast, probably ultimately around the world. So the idea of how people wanted to express themselves, Wally was a land speed racer. He was a Bonneville guy, a Muroc guy, a El Mirage guy. And, those places are great. Today, it's hard to get to Bonneville in August, September, October today. Could you imagine in the 40s and 50s? It
Right.
would have been like trying to go to the moon. Um, so drag racing was a way to bring speed to the people. And I thought, okay, this idea of safety, if I could do it twice or 10 times, I could get faster with every iteration. Wally's, when he talks about the beginning of drag racing, he always starts with driving from Los Angeles on a 6-hour drive to go 100 miles north of the city to a place that he called Muroc, that you and I would call Edwards Air Force Base today. So a place they would drive because there it wasn't salt, it was mud with a high enough alkali content that the mud doesn't cup, it lays flat. And by laying flat, you'd have maybe a 30-mile straight, maybe 10 miles to either side, 7 miles to either side. There was no obstacles to see. And so you saw the potential just go as fast as you could go. And they would leave with really one piece of information, that speed number, right? And that would be the only thing they would care about. What do they run top speed? Whether it was 80 miles an hour or 102 miles an hour, something. So I think early on, really the way your world, that is the purest form. And then I've come in and layered, and I thought, geez, they would go there. They'd have to drive all night. They'd leave Los Angeles at midnight because there was no highway to get there. So you drive all night, get there at dawn, and then show up on a lake bed. And for anybody that's been on the desert or Bonneville, early morning when the sun comes up, it's like a photo studio. Everything looks gorgeous. And I realized, oh, they didn't, it wasn't even obvious to them that this was beautiful until they went there. And some of the other things, that we think of now, the DA, the air density, when it's cool and rich and dense, cars go faster. Scientifically, it was knowable, but I'm not sure that they knew. I think they probably discovered, hey, if we get there early, we go faster. So let's be there. Let's make the first runs when the air is cool. And just this romantic story of they'd be there at dawn, it would be beautiful, start to take pictures because again, this is coming out of a car magazine world where imagery is the thing that communicated across. And then the numbers, were the things that kept going back there to try to increase and improve. So maybe an anecdotal story I'm going to tell right now. I'll kind of jump in again. NHRA's 75th anniversary. Wally Parks, a guy that comes from Southern California Timing Association, SCTA. He was the president of that before he ran Hot Rod Magazine. 1949, they have a trophy for the top speed run. Again, back to the numbers. Who was the fastest pass of a Bonneville Speed Week? So you take this guy's experiences, comes from magazine sides, got photographers around him. Imagery is important, national message, trying to unify everything. And I thought, geez, I don't have any evidence that Wally Parks ever made a drag strip pass. I've seen time slips from a run at Bonneville from Muroc. There's a funny story there that he once compared time slips with Chuck Yeager, who broke the sound barrier at Muroc/Edwards. And Wally said, I went here fast before you ever came here, Chuck. But I know he won his class at a Daytona beach run in a 57 Plymouth. But I don't have any time slips from running a drag strip. So through this search, I thought, there's a picture of him with Frank Hawley, and Wally's wearing a race suit. And I thought, well, I can go ask Frank. And I said, Frank, I seen this photo. Did Wally do your school? And he said, no, Wally went for a ride, probably in his 80s, went for a ride in one of the cars. So he had no evidence that Wally made a pass. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on all this. And for people that are listening to this, 4th of July used to be the traditional time of the Pikes Peak hill climb. And in the 50s and early 60s, 4th of July weekend, Wally Parks would be at Pikes Peak because one of the founding members, along with Wally, was a guy named Ack Miller, and that was kind of Ack's thing. Ack was a sports car driver. Basically, if there was a race, Ack would run in it. And Wally and Ack are in a photo of a guy named Ray Brock, there, another Hot Rod Magazine guy, and they're in a 1958. I'll call it a kit car. It's entered as a Corvette, but it's not a Corvette. It's got a small block Chevy in it. And on the fender, it says Hot Rod Special. And on the base of the passenger side windshield, it's got that logo over your right shoulder, the NHRA logo dedicated to safety. And I'm putting this together. I realized, first year sports cars ran at Pikes Peak. It was won by a founding member of the NHRA. Mm-hmm. And for 10 years, Ack was the guy to beat in sports cars there. So I have this Ack, and Ack Miller is a guy with no heirs, no kids. So we don't really know much of Ack unless you know his history and his time slips and his numbers. Ack becomes an important person in the story for me in the history. Wally's last office, we think, at Hot Rod, he's sitting at a desk, and we'll publish a story about this in the coming weeks. It's Wally sitting at a desk, 1962, suit and tie, signing what might be his official resignation letter from Hot Rod or from Peterson Publishing. And behind him is this glorious photo of Bonneville at dawn or sunset. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's a 27 Ford with a mid-engine, moon discs on the wheels, and the driver of that car is Ack Miller. That photo's from 1951, Bonneville, the year NHRA was born. And it's the photo that was behind Wally this whole time. And it kind of was, formative. And I thought, this is an important piece for NHRA in the history. So combining all this story together, all this data, it was in the museum. I work with an NHRA museum that's behind you in that image in Pomona. And there's a display, small little photo with some text. And it's 2 cars drag racing at Pomona. And it says Wally Parks drag racing. And there he is running in another Ford Roadster. And I see him. I don't know what his ETs were, but I see the picture, and the guy in the other lane is Ack Miller. Wow. So I don't know what he ran, but that's my evidence that Wally definitely, at least once, was a drag racer. And this whole thing, this NHRA, this was his hot rod. This was his race team. But I know for sure at least once he made a pass.
That's fantastic. Well, we stay in touch with Richard Parks, his son. Who's got volumes and volumes on his dad and mom, and I actually want to publish a lot of that eventually. But do you have those volumes from him?
I do. So Richard and Wally's other son David, who I never met, but David passed, and Richard is a great resource, knowledgeable, and then Richard's son Scott Parks, who, for those people watching, listening, if you never met Wally and you wanted to feel what Wally was like, Scott Parks is kind of that embodiment in terms of stature, his voice, just this overarching calming effect. So I highly recommend that. And for people, maybe this week you saw NHRA's announced the 2027 schedule will begin in Pomona again, back to our traditional layout. Scott Parks will be there. You can count on it. And I don't even have to tell you who he is. When you see him, you'll say, oh, that man is a Parks. That must be Wally's grandson right there.
I love it. That's great. I got my iconic Wally Parks moment. I've never had a chance to interview him or anything, but I was at Indy covering for my little drag list when it was a booklet in about 86. And I stepped out of the press and I went, to the railing in the back of the Wally Parks Tower. I don't know if it was called that then, but it is now, or well, whatever. But there he was, and I was like, "Oh, Mr. Parks! Wow, what a nice to introduce myself and thanked him for the sport basically." And he was very kind, and we had a 30-second, 40-second moment, but he was just a gentleman. Pretty great to meet him.
Yeah, and again, I saw him at a distance. My timing was such that I could see him but not meet him, and you kind of feel his presence. And I think the idea of a statesman, if he was the governor of California, I would have bought that, right? Kind of had that presence. If he was a guy that was, credited with us surrounding ourselves around it and focusing on making this happen, that I would buy it too. We talked earlier today. If you were to try to start an organization like the NHRA today, it would be impossible. And the idea that back then, maybe because the delta between what people were doing and what people thought was possible, it was maybe smaller, or maybe everything was possible at that time. Now people ask me, what's the fastest you've ever gone? You've been, in this industry, you've been with NHRA for 10 years. Have you ever driven a top fuel car? Have you ever driven a funny car? I said, no, that you can't just get in one of those. At one point, maybe you could, but you don't just, I've been in the 11s. I've been in a Frank Hawley, dragster. But the idea of it's such a big jump. It would be like, you don't just meet a person in a drag race, you go right to Wally Parks, and he probably had a notepad that if you guys could share, exchange notebooks, it would have made sense to you what was important to him, and vice versa,
Right.
vice versa.
Well, things progress, right? I mean, you can have a thought of how you want to do this, but you never know exactly how things are going to work out. And NHRA and other organizations make changes every single year based on the reality of what occurred. And you
That's
just
right.
keep incrementally getting better. So 75 years of doing that's awfully hard to duplicate.
Yeah, and for me, part of this sideline, and I wrote today, so I'm going to write for National Dragster. I'll write for NHRA.com. Local ABC affiliate came out and did some filming at our museum, so I went there and we kind of talked about what is all of this, and why. And they were anchoring around Southern California car culture, 250th anniversary of the United States, and for me, whatever hot rodding is, and I think that was a term that was. It was a negative connotation when it began. You were a hot rodder. That was trouble. That was outlaw. But I think that's take whatever you have and find a way to improve it, incrementally every single time. Again, coming back to it's safe to do it again. And if you can do it again, every time you do it, you're going to improve. Now, to the point where when I look at the stories, if I could drill down, take all my stories, take away all the words, if I could only ask you one question about two different things, to take two systems, two competitors, two businesses, two people, two technologies, I would ask which one's fastest?
Mm-hmm.
And whichever one's fastest, I think that's the best one. And I think whatever we're talking about, I think that's still true. Dishwashers, engines, cars, computers, interviews, the idea of, I think if I could only ask one question, and I think that's why the stats, the numbers are, and were so important, still are so important. And again, capture the imagination. I'm curious from your perspective, maybe Bill, John, the idea of, record setting speeds. If we come from a Bonneville background and if you think of it that way, the fact the numbers were important. I look at Bonneville as why Comp Eliminator has so many subcategories, and there's a place that there's room for everybody to run because there's a scenario that you fit into. That makes sense to me. Again, sidebar, F1's Cadillac entry. Everybody that watches this now knows that Cadillac is racing an F1 this year. They've begun, and they're using a Ferrari sourced powertrain. It's a 1.6 liter V6 twin turbo, maybe single turbo, electric component. And for 2 years, they'll use that. And General Motors is using this time to develop their own engine. So the guy behind that is a guy named Russell Blinas that is a drag racer. If anybody looks him up, every drag program from DRC Pro Stock Engine to Camaro body to eCopo to every crate engine program you ever saw from General Motors, Russ's name is going to be close to that. He worked with Josh Peterson, who was the head of NHRA Tech and Competition, both General Motors engineers, both drag raced together. It came to NHRA. So Russ is the guy behind the powertrain that we have yet to see Cadillac produce. And within this, I said to him, not that you would, but is there anything that would keep you from being able to run that powertrain that is yet uninvented in a Comp Eliminator car? And he said, no. In fact, they even speculated the category, again, not knowing anything about what it is, it would run in a C-Cat altered category. And I love that drag racing is so inclusive that you could show up with a Winter Nationals in 2029, 2028, whenever that comes out. And it sure wouldn't have to know anything about it. Just show up and we would have a category for you to run in with it. So that's where maybe the numbers, the story, the opportunity, are all for the race. And I love that about this place.
I do love that. And Bonneville is just amazing for that. No matter what you bring, there's a category for it. And you're right. I hadn't really thought about it, but Comp Eliminator is almost exactly that, right? Bring something and run it and be a little faster than the other guy or gal.
Yep.
But that's really amazing things. And the Cadillac things, that's fascinating. It all reminds me in a way of when NHRA had Pro Stock Truck back in the day. Well, not all the manufacturers had their motor programs, put together yet. So there was made some adjustments until everybody caught up at one point. But then it was, you do what you do to get people get things on the track and make it happen. That's fascinating. I think with the Brad Pitt movies, everybody's like getting re-energized in F1. And I saw just clips of it the other day and it looked great. I didn't see the whole thing. I'm really would love to see, and then Shirley Muldowney's Heart Like a Wheel was great, but I keep Big Daddy keeps talking about doing the Garlits film, and I think there's interest there. But I would love to see that. I don't think we've fully seen the sport, shown on the big screen, and it would be difficult, I guess, because it's such a visceral in-person sport. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or if you've worked on any of that.
Well, we're working with them. Again, I've got to spend a little bit of time with him. Now he can hear, he could have a conversation. He's had an implant put in, so he could always communicate with you. He just do a voice to text,
Right?
And now you can talk with him. So I'm working with him on some footage. And there's in 1963 when nitromethane was brought back to NHRA drag racing Winter Nationals. There's a scene here. We have the TV shows back from that time period. And there's a local news reporter outside the car wearing a suit. And he does some preamble question like this. And he's very professional, very polished, and asks a great question. And then he gives the mic to Don Garlits. And you realize Garlits is better on camera guy than this news guy. He is so polished. He's so suave. Doesn't repeat. There's no there's no and. He's considered the entire conversation top to bottom, every single way. He's charming and intelligent. And I thought, well, this guy has a story. So it's so enormous. I don't know how he's going to tell it all. But I am intrigued to help. NHRA is helping. The idea of just going back through all the footage, all the photos, and it's going to be fantastic. Within NHRA, so NHRA is currently based in San Dimas, California. In 1986, they bought a building in Glendora, California, at the end of this road that was Financial Way. They were the last building on the end of the road, cul-de-sac. Um, in that building on the first floor, there was a photo archive, and every photo that NHRA ever published in National Dragster magazine, they would create a print of that image. So you take a slide, you would then essentially create a print that would run in the magazine, and then that large photo would go in a folder and it would go in a filing cabinet. So you could walk into this room, and they would be organized typically by driver's last name, and it was like a museum. That most people, I started to think of it as, we have this family photo album that most people have never seen of their family. And you'd kind of walk in and you'd see, and then there would be some race breakdowns, and then there'd be things for SEMA and different events. And I went looking for Don Garlitz one day, and I went to the G's, and I can't find it. It's all vanilla envelopes or folders, and you're sorting through different penmanship from decades of different people, all the same structure. In fact, we still use that same structure in the digital world now. It's a replication, so it's forward and backwards compatible, even though we don't deal in prints anymore. I can't find the Garlitz stuff. And at the time, head of photography was a woman named Teresa Long, phenomenal talent, super creative person. And she said, "Oh, that's adorable. You thought his photos would fit in that?" She said, "Let me show you." And we walked into the room, and it's a periphery around the walls. She said, "See these filing cabinets here in the middle?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "This is Don's stack of filing cabinets right here. He's not a drawer. He's not an envelope. He is a stack of filing cabinets because his story is so big. He's come back with so many different things that he is his own section of the room, and he's always going to be."
How many times did he come back? How many times did he get written off, and how many times did he come back? It was just amazing.
Well, did I see from your site his quickest pass? Is that right? I saw some note that suggested, was it in Shirley's car? Is that right?
It was one of them. He did come back and he ran that. He did come back and make a pass in one of Shirley's cars, but then he came back and drove another car that I believe was owned by, it's skipping my mind. One of the funny car racers,
Okay.
but owned a car. It was Clapshaw or somebody. I'm mixing this up, but yeah, he came
Well,
back and ran some numbers.
yeah, we're jumping all over, and again, I enjoy it. But that idea of, I've been with NHRA for 10 years, and I would encourage anybody that is periphery to this, that the best part about working for the NHRA is the fact that you get to root for everybody. You get to see all of these stories. It is overwhelming because there's so many good ones. You get to make naive mistakes like, where's Don's folder? And then you get to meet racers. Joe Amato, we were doing something like this. There was a period of time where NHRA would, during race weekends on a Tuesday, Wednesday, we would use Skype, and we would Skype people in to a studio in Glendora, and we would have Amanda Busick, and at the time, Louis Bloom would do interviews just like this, not nearly as refined as this, but just like this.
I'm sure Amanda and Louis were doing great. No.
Well, they were phenomenal. It was Skype and the setup, and I would do a pre-call so we could get internet speeds and connections and get lighting and those kinds of things, set up. And I met Joe Amato this way, and I knew who Joe Amato was, but we had never spoken. And we were like this. We're doing a pre-call, and I said, "Mr. Amato, this, Mr. Amato, that." I said, "No, it's just Joe. It's just Joe." And I thought, geez. And again, the idea of all the capabilities, all of the success and the prominence, and he doesn't know me from Adam. And but we're already peers, right? And again, that's the beauty of this, is that it's all that great success, all those great numbers, and then they enjoy it, and they enjoy sharing it with you. So that's kind of the nature of this place and these positions. Wally probably started it, and we're to Matty Gordon, continuing, and everybody in between. If you want to come and find a place to tell your great story, see what you're capable of. Right. If you want to work 7 days a week, every day of the year, and have no one around you ask you, "How come you're working so hard? How come you're doing this?" You're never going to be asked that here. If there's some people in life that wonder what they're really capable of, people in NHRA drag racing, they get to know. They get to know.
I love it. That's so great. Man, David, we haven't even touched like the canned questions I had for you, where we made me started. But what a great conversation. What if we share it with the rest of our gang? You ready for a couple of questions from the
Sure,
chat
sure.
the
Let's go.
chat line out there? John, who do we have with us tonight?
We have a nice crowd here tonight, and we have some interesting comments that have been made, which is really cool. But David, you have a dream job, and it's a thrill having you with us tonight. It's a wonderful thing. Jay Radabaugh said he's in the staging lanes. He says, my drag racing and hot rodding history started with the July 1955 issue. It changed my life and started my fabulous journey to being around things that make noise and go fast. And he said, when I was a sophomore in high school in Marietta, Ohio, one of my teachers asked me who I'd like to have dinner with, and I immediately said Wally Parks and Chet Atkins. And she looked at me like, who? Now, me personally, I had a subscription to Hot Rod magazine from 1958 to 1967 when I left home to go to college. And for the first few years, Hot Rod featured Indy cars and stock car racing, as well as drag racing, land speed records, and street rods and customs. I remember seeing AJ Foyt featured regularly. AJ Foyt's from Houston, which is where I am. He lived right up the street here. And I never understood the hoodlum image that hot rodders were stuck with in the old days. But we were drag racers, not juvenile delinquents. And Wally Parks did a great job to fix our image. My dad accepted my passion for hot rods. If not for the NHRA, who knows where we'd be now.
Doing
Well, and
something
I
right there.
applaud you. And again, at my best at this dream job, I get to bring everybody with us, right? I'm never going to have dinner by myself. You're all coming with me, and in that, the idea of AJ Foyt. So I was at Hot Rod right around the time Ford went back Le Mans racing in the mid 2010s, mid 2014, 15, 16 timeframe. And Dan Gurney was still alive, and AJ Foyt was alive. And I said, "Look, I'm aware of the Ford versus Ferrari story. I read Go Like Hell, which is a phenomenal book about that race. And that competition. If people haven't read it, it's phenomenal. The Ford story is fascinating. There's the Ferrari side, which the movie doesn't touch on because it's too big. That's also a fascinating story. So in the book, I couldn't recommend high enough. A guy from Hot Rod named Marlon Davis gave me his copy. Marlon's no longer with us, um, so I get to keep his book. But in this, we asked Dan Gurney if he'll sit for an interview with us at Hot Rod, talk about winning in '67, a Le Mans GT40 car, and he won't. We can't get him. And AJ Foyt says, sure. So a journalist named John Perley Huffman, a freelancer who's written for all kinds of things, still writes. He hands me this piece, and I remember the opening line, and I don't have a great memory, but I can feel these things. So the first line is, nobody ever calls him Anthony, Tony, or Junior. They just call him AJ. And I thought, oh, this is awesome. And he takes the audience through what those cars were, because back then it was just two drivers, AJ and Dan, and their physiques couldn't have been different, and their talents really couldn't have been different. But it is a phenomenal story. So we had this piece, and at the time, I was working on a supercharger story with Edelbrock, and Edelbrock is not too far from where I am in Torrance, California. And Vic, the guy, again, no longer with us, but if you had time with him, authentic, loved it, loved everything about it. I said, we did this story, and I couldn't get Dan. I wonder if his health is poor. And he said, no, Dan was here yesterday. He said, he just didn't want to do it, I guess, or you didn't ask him, right? He said, you should have come through me. And I always regret that. Sometimes there are these stories and those meetings that you don't get to have. That's one for me that we got AJ's side, which is phenomenal. But we never got Dan's side and got that opportunity to tell it, which I regret.
Really cool. John, anyone else with another thought or from you?
Well, we had a comment that, am I still unmuted?
Yep.
Okay. We had a comment that the Snake and the Mongoose movie was truly great, and I didn't get to see that movie, and I'm not sure if NHRA was involved in that or not.
Well, it was before my time. I can tell you when I came into NHRA in 2016 timeframe, there was still some footage licensing stuff that I had seen from that movie that was coming together. Perdome and Tom are two, super important people at NHRA. I met Tom previously prior to my time coming to NHRA. And then I don't recall the year that he passed, but it was probably in the 16, 17 timeframe. I know I did meet him at a Winter National. Well, maybe I met him at the finals or at my first Winter Nationals. My timeline, 2016 Winter Nationals, I was with Hot Rod. 2016 NHRA finals, I was part of NHRA. I think 2017 Winter Nationals, Tom and Don were being interviewed for some things, so I was able to work with both of them. So definitely, again, two people that have always been important. Again, an energy within NHRA that kind of took Wally's vision of the cars for the stars and the best dressed, best appearing, brought in some sponsorship connections, and then made it so that we could all see what was possible. My anecdotal story here. There was a memorial that NHRA hosted in Pomona for Tom. Usually we'll do that at the museum. It can fit a couple hundred people. That wasn't going to be big enough, so the NHRA rented on the Fairplex property. There's some exhibition space that some people have been to for car shows, and then there's some meeting rooms, much larger place, the kind of place you'd have a prom or a wedding. So they rent out a room, and it was a memorial for Tom. And I sat in the row, and there were some people there, and the program was handed out, and then the list of speakers was presented, and I don't remember but it was a who's who. John Forrest was there, Perdome was there, everybody was there, and the guy sitting next to me said, "The first speaker just talked for 25 minutes, and there's 10 of these guys." He said, "This is going to go on for hours." He said, "I'm out of here." And this was not one of our people. This is a guy that was there, felt responsible to show up. And he said, "Are you going to stay here for the whole thing?" And I said, "I'm going to stay here after. I'm going to stay here until it's all over." And what a great time it was, again, to remember collectively this contribution and all the people that came. I was getting some water because, again, we were there for a while, and there's a station in the back. And it's a gentleman that I saw, and I recognized him, but again, not great with memory, not great with names and faces. And he said, "Just like the NHRA, you got drinks here and no ice." And I said, "Well, I apologize. I'm sure I could find you some ice. Let me see, I do this." And he said, "Whoa." He said, "Before you get being super nice to me, you work for the NHRA. You probably should know that, you should know who I am." Because I haven't always seen eye to eye with the NHRA, but this is, it's just a small thing. Ice isn't that big a deal. Water's cold. And that was Richard Tharp.
Okay.
King Richard Tharp out of Texas. And again, charming, soul of NHRA. But this idea of him coming in, and that whole room was full of stories and people and success like that. Where can you think of another place that a high school dropout or a PhD rocket scientist could come in and find a home here, could make a contribution, make a participation. And then you find, that this place kind of is a hybrid of all those types of intellects and passions. People want to work hard, this definitely attracts them.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Yeah, Tharp, we have got some Tharp stories and many as they relate to Wally. They're on the drag racing list pages, which I need to convert. People do videos now, so I do want to convert all those eventually. But so great. Well, thank you, John, and thank you to the folks out there in the chat. A lot of times they're out there chatting among one another and just digging the night. So, and we're kind of moving towards the end of the show. David, do you have a little more time to spend with us tonight?
I do. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or anything that I want to talk about. Again, I think for us, I appreciate the opportunity and just reliving some of these stories, whether they're mine in the last 10 years, mine at Hot Rod in the 5 years before, or again, the idea of some of these stories that aren't even mine, but are super important to me.
Right.
So I appreciate sharing them with you.
Well, that's great. Well, let's talk about your role. Baseline. Walk us through your role at NHRA today. What's a typical race weekend look like for you, or week? How does your team decide which stories fans are going to see, and what are you trying to communicate? Obviously, the 75th is the big thing, but do you sort of put together the whole project plan for how you're going to attack that? How does that all work?
Yeah, so a lot of it is going to be momentum based. We're going to know, we have 20 national events that we're going to cover. We have probably 49 divisional events, and then we have probably now dozens and dozens of Summit ET series and specialty events within the course of the year. So we have a big editorial content map that sits in front of my desk at the office in San Dimas. And again, I think the momentum and the expertise is something that we can rely on. If Much like we said earlier, if you try to start the NHRA today, you wouldn't be able to do it. If you tried to figure out a content plan to cover all this today, I don't think you would be able to. The fact that it grew in pieces means that we can. So for me, I come from a journalism background. I wrote for car magazines my whole professional life. When I came to NHRA, I wasn't writing for National Dragster. Today, people that get the next issue, this issue, and the next one, you'll see my byline in it. We're doing event coverage from Epping, New Hampshire, and Bristol.
Mhm.
You're also going to see that I'll write the back page of National Dragster. And in 2025, I was focusing on kind of NHRA's history before 1951. And it became this series of letters that I would refer to as a love letter to speed. And this idea of all of the things that allowed Wally to create this and all the people and see that opportunity. Again, early days prior to 1951, he's come from a car magazine. He works on a monthly basis. He then starts this NHRA while he's doing Hot Rod magazine. He already has the biggest car magazine on the planet. And then he tells the boss, Robert E. Peterson, I'm gonna do this on the side. So I have a great track record. I have great staff, photographers, writers. The NHRA is a relatively small organization. So tomorrow morning I'll be there in San Dimas, and from competition to accounts payable to our legal department and all the executives are there, and we rely on a lot of momentum. For us, I'm going to write. We spend a lot of time, like everybody, answering and solving problems. There's a lot of customer service to get right within NHRA. Some of you watching this, listening, have the 75th anniversary book that NHRA has put out. It's a hardcover book, coffee table book that we weren't sure how many would sell. We're now producing our third printing of this book. So tomorrow you'll see me jump into the distribution of that third printing, where we expected one printing and a second printing. There might even be a fourth printing at the pace that this is moving at. I also work with the museum, and we're coming off of a new Cars and Coffee event, and we have two events that we're kind of in the middle of. I just wrote the story about the Hot Rod reunion in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Some of the people watching this have been at Beach Bend, fantastic, historic drag strip track. And then that's a mixture of this hot rodding, drag racing, nostalgia series, and part of the Hot Rod Heritage Series that NHRA puts on. And then also I do the contingency program.
Wow.
So all the little decals on the side of race cars, those are partnerships, not sponsorships. And NHRA, it's not a profit center for NHRA, but it is something that early on Wally realized, if I knew the guys from Goodyear and I could provide a marketplace and environment where they could succeed by attaching to racer success, then both groups would succeed and NHRA would be all set. This is the 60th anniversary of the NHRA contingency program.
Wow.
And so we work on that on a daily basis. And then this week we'll go to Sonoma for a series of events that the Denso Sonoma Nationals. And we'll also have a sponsor summit where we'll meet with some of our biggest stakeholders to make sure that the story, the opportunity, the value aligns. And early on, and I wrote this for National Dragster, and this will also be part of the talking point. Wally's experience at Hot Rod Magazine, he already knew all the automakers, all of the big oil companies, all the tire companies, all the hot rod shops, everybody. And he still starts this as a membership organization. And still to today, the primary, this is not it's obvious. NHRA is a nonprofit. It's a 501c6. You can't donate to it as tax deduction, but it's a nonprofit. The museum is a 501c3, and you can donate to the museum as a nonprofit or as a tax deduction. But it's still based in ticket sales. That's where NHRA is. So it's still customer based, and the sponsorship is second. But that is an important relationship that we want to make sure that if racers have success and you can share that success with corporate partners, it's just going to make things better for drag racing. So it's a lot of different opportunities. I think the modern workplace is that where nobody has one hat that's a simple hat. It's a complex hat. It's a good hat. That's kind of my week at work.
Wow.
So see you in Sonoma.
Yeah. Well, how do you, well, certainly some of us will be out there. I will be elsewhere. I'll be across the pond, as they say, taking a vacation. But well, so I've worked with, Phil Burgess for almost 40 years. Great guy since when he took that over. How do you guys interact? Because you write for National Dragster a bit, but he's the editor, and I saw him at Budds Creek, my local track about 20 miles from here, and popped in there to say hello. And of course, he was right in front of the thing, writing the event as qualifying was going on. He didn't have a lot of time. He was at work, so I let him do his work. But how do you two work together? How do you work with the rest of the national dragster staff?
It's a great point. So I will sometimes, Kevin McKenna and Phil Burgess, two in-house staff writers that will create event coverage at these 20 national events. And then I'll cover maybe about 5 of them this year, and I'll try to replicate what they're doing. Now, they come from this background, this pace, more of a newspaper pace. They're used to publishing weekly. I come from a magazine pace, which was monthly. So it really exposes their capabilities. So you'll know the difference between a Phil Burgess, Kevin McKenna, and a David Kennedy covered race. But I will use that as an opportunity where, the play-by-play event coverage, that is, what are we seeing? What are we experiencing? What would we be talking about if you were here? What would you feel? And try to share that. If it's a record run, if it's Sean Langdon having throttle issues that he's able to not succumb to, Matty Gordon having an experience. There was a pro mod car that in Bristol essentially hit the center of the track because the steering wheel had come off during the burnout, and then he was able to stage, launch, and win. And just to try to explain that, and because it's almost something unintelligible in the moment, but it happens. So writing that and covering it in real time and trying to put a fine point on what's happening that's important matters. Now, you earlier you'd asked the editorial, what's an important story? Some of these things you start to get because you're immersed in it. So coming into this year, one of the ones that caught my attention, Austin Prock, funny car racer, previously John Force, now with Bob Tasca, 2-time champion, top of his game to the point where it was a masterpiece to watch him race.
Right.
And just phenomenal. Everything about just a masterpiece. Mark Powick, one-time pro stock racer, now factory stock showdown racer, also a 2-time champion. Also a masterpiece of watching him race. Both of them in 2026 are in new cars with newish teams, similar crews, and it shows us how difficult this sport is because they don't forget everything. They just got a new car, and they're essentially same engines, and then you can see how difficult this is. So I thought, let me compare these two things. Let me point this out, because the minute I say that to get 2 totally different kinds of cars. Both of them are supercharged V8s, but that's about all they have in common. What's the same? And then I thought, Austin, you found success that Mark still hasn't quite gotten to. Let me talk to both of you about the frustration, because you'll both understand that perfectly. And I realized the worst thing I could do to a racer is to take a 2-time champion and then give him a new car and make it so he doesn't always qualify. That's the way I would torture a drag racer. So I just reflecting on both these things, and then in the moment, talk with Austin, who was phenomenal. I said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to compare and contrast. And then I said, what advice do you have for Mark Powick? And again, I don't even know if they know each other. but he knows the situation. And then to watch Austin shift from, oh no, I see. He said, tell Mark to not swear word forget who he is.
Mhm.
Because through all this, that becomes the hardest part, is that you start to question, was I ever what I thought I was? And I thought, what great advice to then go over to Mark, who I thought I was going to ask Mark, what advice to give to Austin. But here was this advice that a more experienced racer needed from this young kid. And, Mark still hasn't found that success yet, but I think it's coming for him. I think it's coming for him. So those are the stories that I like. You take the numbers, you take the experience, and then you take two guys that probably don't necessarily all talk together, but they're having the same exact experience. And I really like maybe being that conduit to connect those two people.
I love that. What a great story. And it's great. You get to go deeper on some of those stories than the play-by-play. Can I give you a small world anecdote here? Mark Powers
Please.
was the super pro champ at Thompson Drag Raceway when I was racing in, say, 75, 76. So he was our big dog at the local track there. And everybody knew how tough he was. But then, of course, he went on to be, pro, and still the nicest guy in the world.
Well, and so what a torture this is for him to
Mhm.
not have the success that he once did, and to not be able to give up because he wants to have it again. And again, I do believe in it. Seeing it was only a matter of time for Austin. There's too much talent, there's too much capability, and then it becomes a durability of self, of soul. Can they get back to where they were? Again, the task of family. They had that soul, right? Whatever that support, whatever that well is, they could go back to it. And the fact that Bob Tasca, the third, could get out of the car and then to be able to talk to him about that, like that's how important this success is. And in an interview at Epping, I asked him, to give me a sense of how difficult I realized, if you gave me Tasca Automotive Group and you handed it to me, would I be able to succeed with it?
Yeah.
It would all fall apart. I'd be lucky to hold it together long enough to keep it in business. And then I realized, this is just like that. The idea of that is a family that understands how to have a legacy success and then bring in the talent where they need to go to the next level. It all ends up becoming the same thing.
That's amazing. And it builds on what we were talking earlier with the NHRA. You incrementally build these things over decades, and it's awful hard to switch overnight. So amazing. Well, if you've spent decades traveling around with racers and race teams. Let's go to the crazy story thing. What's the craziest things ever happened to you during a race weekend, or in the pits, or on the starting line, or even trying to get a story? Any wacky stories coming to mind in that regard?
I think the first one that probably comes to mind is when I went to NHRA. My first race 10 years ago was Bristol. And Bristol is, if you're Los Angeles based, it's tough to fly across country. You fly to a small airport, then you drive long distance to this glorious track.
Mhm.
And you usually get there with our schedule sometime around midnight or after midnight on Thursday night. And you get up the next morning, and with the time change, it's an early morning to go to the track. I was there with some new guys on the TV side, and we spent the whole day. There was a rain delay, and back then, NHRA's strategy was we just kind of worked with the rain. So maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever time Friday night qualifying ended, it was a late night. It probably wasn't that late, but it was late. But I remember being there. I think Courtney Force was maybe number one qualifier in funny car. We're having a conversation like this, trying to get some quotes from her about her position, and she said, can we stop you right there? I said, yeah. Why? She said, these are the jet cars that run. I love these. I want to watch them.
I love
And
that.
so, yeah, just the idea. We're having a conversation like this is all about her. And she said, could we just stop? And I said, sure. These are the jet cars. I love watching these. So we finished up, and I left with these two executives, and we went back to the hotel. We ate, minimal stuff because everything is closed. And the guy at the time was my boss. He said, are you ready to go back again and do this tomorrow? And I said, yeah. And he said, have you ever done anything like this? And I said, go to the drag strip 2 days in a row? And he said, yeah. I said, I have, the last time I did it, we would have driven 300 miles tonight to go to the next one. Because I'm coming from the hot rod side, the drag week side, and the idea of being exhausted. That part I knew. The idea of the speeds and the professionalism, I didn't know. And so when Courtney Force said, let's pause here. Let me watch these because I love these cars. Again, they were going, half the speed that she was going, half the ET that she was going, but she still was intrigued by it. I think within this world, there are so many of those stories. It just becomes part of the truth where you end up having those experiences. Again, the long term, the fact they come and go. My category, this may be an important story for me because it ties some things together. One of the first things I wrote was about an off-road race truck. For the people listening to drag racing, it would be like a pro mod car where it looked like a production pickup truck, but it's all tube chassis and hand fabricated everything. And so I got color slides, I got a text sheet, and I got the phone numbers of the driver and maybe the engine builder. And so you write a story about this in an office in a computer. I write to this piece, and the time the magazine made a poster of it. And for some reason, I never called the guy that built the race car. I don't know why, but he had an unusual name, and I remember it, and it kind of stuck with me. And I can't tell you why I didn't call him. I should have, but I didn't. And his name was Nye, N-Y-E, Frank.
Yep.
So this is around 2000 timeframe, and that fall, maybe spring of 2001, a person that has probably been on the show as well, and everyone watching will know, Brian Loans. Brian Loans came out to visit me in California because, again, I like to tell this story. Some of the people will know this. Brian Loans and I went to college together. We're both from Massachusetts. Oh. So I knew Brian from before he was on TV, before he was any of these things, and he hasn't changed a bit. He's just gotten better. He was always charming, always funny, and he always loved this. So Brian came spring break to visit me, and we went to the NHRA museum. And we went on a Friday afternoon, and I remember we got there. There was a gentleman from General Motors, Arizona Proving Grounds, that had come out. He was asleep in his truck. We engaged with him. We went to the museum, and right inside that front door, the back wall was a 1968-69 Mickey Thompson Mustang magnesium monocoque funny car. And that's a lot of M's, right? And here was this spaceship parked in the back, and just in awe of it. And it said, built by Nye Frank. And I thought, well, this is 1968-69 timeframe. I just wrote a feature about an off-road race truck, with 37-inch tall, 35-inch tall tires and suspension travel. And I thought, Nye Frank, it can't be the same guy, but such an unusual name. It kind of haunted me. We saw the museum. I took Brian over to the Pomona track. First time I ever went there was with Brian. We talked our way in and drove over and kind of checked out this hallowed ground, not knowing that we'd both come back to it years later. I went on, and at some point I was working in an off-road magazine and talking to a Ford engineer about a race program that they'd gotten back this truck, Ford Motor Company, they had, and the race team they had given it to, most truck frames are riveted together, riveted or welded. And he said this truck that we had given to this race team, they had taken all of the rivets out. He said, which is a nightmare to do that. And they had replaced them all with the next size larger grade 8 bolt and done this. And Ford Engineering was just in awe of the labor and the idea. Why would you do that? He said, and there's all these other little subtleties that we noticed on the vehicle that had made it better, made it more durable and perform better. He said, you should go see this guy, the guy that did it for us. That he's I don't know if he's an engineer, he's just a natural. He's out there by you. His name is Nye Frank. At Thanksgiving dinner, I'm from Massachusetts, I'm in California, and a guy there talking about race cars, we're having a conversation like this, and he tells me a story about he was once sitting in an Indy car in Banning, California, that a guy had poured the special pad to do the suspension setup on, so he could take all the measurements and everything was level. And he never sat in any car. He couldn't believe it. And there was this place and the story and these things and other technologies they'd seen. And that guy's name was not Frank. And I said, so I have to go meet this guy. And his number's in the phone book. And I end up going out, and I'm telling this story because I just found a folder that I have from probably 20 years ago, 24 years ago. And I went and met this guy for a day. Nye was all the same guy. In fact, in the interim, I found that Nye was the guy that helped and built Craig Breedlove's land speed race cars as well, and worked with Mickey Thompson and Smokey Yunick in Florida on some road race stuff. In fact, there's some suspicion that body templates, maybe due to work that Smokey Yunick did in NASCAR, that Nye Frank was the master metalsmith that shrunk these cars. I put all this together, and I went and met Nye. And then when I knew all the story, and actually Nye is no longer with us. When I came to NHRA, that same 1963 year that Garlitz wins in a nitro category, Top Fuel, there's another car that wins. I think I don't know if it would have been Top Gas, 2 engines, dragster.
Probably.
And it's I don't know, it's Frank Peters that's driving it, but the freight train dragster. And in this photo is this young kid in the back. I recognize him because I met him, and that's Nye Frank. So all this story, I think drag racing, I'm convinced this is a philosophy, it's a practice, it's a perfection, whether it's the numbers, the story, the speed, the beauty. I think, it's all a place where we get to make a contribution, see what we're capable of, because it can take it, it can handle it, it wants it, and so we do it. And again, I'm honored to be part of that, and hopefully inspire more people like us to come here to do it too.
So great. Yeah, it's philosophical. This is a great conversation, and I totally agree. It's art, it's humanity. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine not having it in my life, that's for sure. And all these great people we're meeting. And that's so amazing. Can we talk a little bit about the hot rod days? You didn't start at
Sure.
NHRA. How did your path take you from being a lifelong car enthusiast to leading one of the most recognized automotive publications, and eventually, on the planet with hot rod?
Sure. So I come to California writing for Peterson's Four Wheel and Off-Road magazine. I'm a kid from Massachusetts, that we have snow there. So my hot rods are all four-wheel drive, so you don't get stuck. And I apply for a job, and I come out summer of 2000. I start on a Friday, which I thought was a funny day to start. I'm in a 20-story skyscraper that I couldn't even see when I went to interview, because I was looking for a warehouse where car guys would be, and this was a legitimate business. So I write for Full and Off-Road magazine. Peterson is Robert E. Peterson, the guy that Wally was hired by to run Hot Rod. I was there for a few years, and then I took over a diesel magazine and got to kind of experience all of this again. And then I went to the business side. So this is the crux of the story. At the time, I'm a publisher of the Custom Truck Group, which is to say we're creating value for the brands, not writing, not selling ads, but again, making sure the brands have value. And I borrow a G-Wagon, a Mercedes truck from Motor Trend to take some clients to pick them up from the airport. And I want to show up something nice. I don't know what I'm driving at the time, but I'm not as nice as that.
Right.
Motor Trend's across the hallway. I asked them, they said, why don't you take this G-Wagon, you'll like it. And I go to the airport and grab these guys. Come back, return to the vehicle, and a name that might be known to some of you, a gentleman named Angus McKenzie, who was the creative director over the company, who we had seen each other in the hallway for years, exchanged pleasantries, but we didn't have a relationship. And he said, David, why don't you come to my office? Okay, thanks for lending me the truck. I didn't ask him for it. I asked one of his guys, and he said, close the door. Okay, this is the first time we're having a conversation. He said, what do you think about being a publisher? And I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I tell him a nice story. And he said, what do you really think about being a publisher? And I thought, I told him maybe a little more truthful, some of the challenges, some of the, and then he said, what if I told you, I don't think we need publishers here? And I thought, ooh, this isn't going well for me. Now, he's not my boss, but he's definitely kind of affects the future. And then he said to me, would you think about running Hot Rod magazine? Now, at the time, a dear friend of mine and a person I couldn't say enough nice things about, David Freiberger, is the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod. And he's also launching what probably became the most successful, enthusiast division of the modern brand, Roadkill. And he's doing a ton of stuff. And one of those jobs is too much. And he's adding and adding and adding. Um, and they said, we talked about who could backfill his position to let him do these other things and run Hot Rod. And he suggested you. And I was kind of blown away. I was flattered, and then I felt unworthy. So in that opportunity, and Hot Rod, for everybody, and I think this is true, Freiberger said, do the stories that only Hot Rod can do. And I embraced this idea of, I was a kid formed by this magazine. I would get it. And like both of you, sometimes you can't afford to buy all the magazines you want to read. So I'm a product of that environment, right? I got a job in the magazine, so I could probably save money not buying them all. I remember Freiberger brought his staff in to my office. I had a great office in El Segundo already, so it made sense. That's super helpful for anybody looking to move up in the ladder. Get a great office in the front of the building, and that's good for your career trajectory. So we all come in the office, and he then explained to his staff that I was going to be running the place. And super talented writer Alana Scher, super talented writer and photographer Brandon Galogli, super talented car designer turned writer Tom Taylor, Marlon Davis, and Mike Finnegan. All of a sudden, I inherited those people, and a manager, a woman that I'm so close to now. I refer to her as my brother, Julia Sear Sanchez Smart, Julia Smart now. Phenomenal team, and I thought I can do anything with this group, and I could. So at the time, my last name's Kennedy. As a kid, we went on the USS JFK, the non-nuclear version, the original. And I thought, all right, I'm going to print out a picture of this. This is my wall. This is my motivation. With an aircraft carrier, you can do anything. You just don't want to leave it in port. That's the only thing. It's safe there, but that's not really what it's meant to do.
Not what it's meant for, right?
So that became the way I kind of envisioned it, and parts of that don't make sense to people. Bill, I think you're a Navy man, so that probably makes sense to you.
I'm a carrier sailor, 4.5 years, Nimitz.
So within that, that visual that became it. It's a flagship, right? And you can't lose one, period. Right. But you can do anything you want with it. So that's the balance of it. And I was really excited by that. So within that time, we got to do a ton of great stories. We got to talk about everything from the Ford GT program to John Force, not having his Ford partnership. In fact, I don't know, those two things aren't related. And then see John, kind of go back to his beginnings. And within this, Tom Job was a drag racer that I got to meet and learn about. And, the idea of reconnecting Detroit and hot rodding. This is around the time that Hellcat comes back or comes out. And for those people, again, if you're a car person like me, Hemi, 426 Hemi engine, when it first came out in a car, you didn't have a Hemi badge. You had HP to the second power, an HP squared logo. And that didn't last very long because that wasn't very exciting or sexy. So then it became Hemi. Same thing was true with Hellcat. The original Hellcats didn't have the Hellcat logo on the fender. It just said supercharged. I don't even think that made it in production. But through this, I got to experience this. Tim Kaniskis, probably the hot rodder in chief of Stellantis North America, phenomenal guy. Got to meet him through this. Got to connect at that level. Got to do all kinds of things. Again, diesel, drag racing, land speed racing, go to Bonneville. I didn't necessarily, I would have gone to Le Mans, but I took a job with NHRA and came there instead because that's how my timing worked out. But just awesome. And maybe the last part I'll think of is Marlon Davis, who was a technical writer, wrote for Carcraft and Hot Rod. and just a first principles thinker before I would even know that term. We would talk, and David Freiberger said, look, Marlon's going to come in once a month and he's going to shut down your day. Let him. It'll be worth it. And Marlon and I were talking one day about something, and he said, geez, we really see eye to eye on these things. And I think he was a little taken aback, almost suspicious that I might be giving him lip service. And I said, well, no, Marlon, this is important to me. I said, you taught me this stuff. You just didn't know who I was.
Right.
And now you get to see the fruits of your labor. And I said, and it's not just me, there's probably millions of me over the course of Marlon's life, of a writer's life. And it's a one-way relationship. You put out the great stuff. And I'm really grateful that I got to work with Marlon. And I'm particularly pleased that I got to tell him that, because sometimes your best work, you don't necessarily even know what it is. What are the things that changed people's lives? Mm-hmm. Maybe to tie aircraft carriers and Marlon and Angus Mackenzie together, at the time, we were trying to find stories that nobody else could do. And it got in my mind that Z01 Camaro had come out and Z28 Camaro had come out. And I thought, let's do a 0 to 60 to 0 test of cars. So I thought that was something neat. And how do I make that a compelling story? How do I take that number and turn it into something that's not just a text? It's not just ink on paper. And it morphed into, let's do it on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So the USS Hornet is a museum ship now here in San Francisco. And I found out that I could rent the deck of the aircraft carrier for a day. I think I'm going to say it was about 30 grand. Maybe it was 16 grand, somewhere in that price point. And they would allow me to take a car and do 0 to 60 and then slam on the brakes to 0 again. And I remember contacting he will remain nameless because he's still there, point of contact at General Motors. I said, this is what I would like to do. Do you have any idea what the distance that car would do it? And he said, I don't, but I could get some calculations. And he came back with a number. And I said, what surface is that on? He said, well, it's on asphalt. And I said, what do you think it would be on teak? Because that's what the deck of the USS Hornet is. So that story, he sent us some cars and we did some testing. And then it got to the point where Tim Kuniskis challenged me. He said, let's do it, but not 0 to 60. Let's do 0 to 100 to 0. Now, I think this is right. The deck of a pre-nuclear aircraft carrier, I believe, is 972 feet long.
Got it.
And I think a nuclear aircraft carrier, except for the original JFK, it's 1,052 feet long.
Yeah.
So one point in my office, I had pictures of aircraft carrier decks, aerial photos on the wall. And Angus Mackenzie came back in and said, what are you doing in here? Are you trying to sink an aircraft carrier? And I said, no. I'm trying to do 0 to 100 to 0 on one. And I don't think that gave him any more comfort. So we never were able to put that together. 0 to 100 to 0 is more than the Hornet would package. 972 feet was not going to be enough. Yeah. And I think 1,052, 1,058 feet, the only aircraft carrier not active that was eligible was the JFK, which was going the museum ship, but was still in the hands of the Navy. The Enterprise had been decommissioned, but I think it has 6 reactors and there was holes through the flight deck, so that wasn't possible. And so this is where maybe I'll bring it back to drag racing. If I was going to ask for the JFK, I was asking the Navy for it. And there's no distinction between an active warship that's coming into retirement versus an active warship that's active. And so I worked through the channels and found this gentleman actually in Los Angeles, probably the federal building, that works with filming and television for military. And I got on the phone with him and I wanted to borrow the Gerald Ford. It's not clear to me to this day that there would have been any cost to do so. but we got on the phone and he said, what makes you think that you at Hot Rod Magazine could use a United States Navy aircraft carrier to do something with a car and maybe even use the word drag race? And I said, well, we've done it twice before. And that he couldn't refute and deny. This is all before my time, but to the best of my knowledge, two stunts of something like this of this caliber had happened. I think both times with Garlits.
Yeah.
So he couldn't tell me no. He sent me a one-page form to fill out and apply, and we never got to that point. I probably still have that form somewhere here. So it was that was how close. Again, that's the legacy of drag racing and hot rod and the Navy. All
We
coming
gotta
together.
bring that one. Well, Garlett's actually, when I was on the Nimitz, Garlett's came. He had just had an accident in Florida, streetcar accident, and came out okay. I think Pat was with him, but he came. He was doing a tour with the Navy to talk about driver safety, and of course, I was not. I was the, and all my buddies said, dude, you're the one guy here on the ship that should go see him, but I was on watch and I couldn't make it down there. But that was very cool. But yeah, this, and I was actually on there when we did a movie. We did the movie called The Final Countdown with Kirk Douglas and a number of other folks. So the Navy will, for the right amount of money and the right PR angle, to make them look good, of course, Tom Cruise has done more for them, I think, the last couple of movies. But that's fascinating. Yeah, we've all seen the pictures of Garlits on the deck, but yeah, I'd be scared of going to 100 on the deck of a carrier and trying to go back to zero. It's a thing. Well, let's talk about, we're obviously on a podcast now. We come from magazines, monthly magazines. You've watched media change dramatically from magazines to websites and then streaming, podcasts, YouTube, social media. How's that changed the way NHRA connects with fans? And where do you see this going over the next 5 years?
Well, we can speculate again. There's some exciting stuff. The idea of we grew up as readers. I think before you said, you became a math guy because you taught yourself a version of algebra, and there was no barrier because you had an enthusiasm, a curiosity to get there. I became a writer because I was a reader, and I had enthusiasm and curiosity to get there. Today, everyone is a content creator, and their device of choice might be, these portable computers, camera studios that they can then shoot and edit and get much more sophisticated. Now, the biggest trend is there's more content than there ever was before. So it's not that we have a shorter attention span. It's just there's so much content and data now that you have to have a way to parse through it all. So I think the first step is you saw an era of we used to pay for media. Now media is free. Media used to be something that you read and consumed front to back. Even the things you didn't care about, you read because there was a finite amount of it. Now media is free and you only, scroll through and click on and watch the things that you are riveted to and by. And in some cases, you don't even watch the whole thing still. So everything has gotten shorter just to try to make sure you're succinct and you're valuing the audience's time and attention. For us, fortunately, the stories have gotten better. And I like to subscribe to the most likely outcome is the most entertaining outcome. That's an Elon Musk perspective. But I think that's true. So when you have, again, last race will take Rod Capps wins in Funny Car, Matty Gordon wins in Top Fuel, and Doug Gordon wins in Alcohol Funny Car. That is the most entertaining winner circle group photo shot, and that's what ends up what's happened, right? So I see that more content, shorter form, less time, but probably as important. We're still up for reading a love letter, this long story that, again, sometimes in these conversations, this is where the audience can sit back and listen to people like us talking and reliving some of these things that may or may not have ever been written down, are probably true, but to the best of our recollection, and might get better over time. I think that those opportunities where let's take the work from the reader and put it on us, and they can enjoy the future. And this part I'm going to make up, but I'd like to put it out there. A lot of future stuff they say is inspired by science fiction writing, where really anything is possible. But if somebody speculated about it, that's the way we kind of go. Um, so for us, NHRA has a photo archive that goes back to the 50s. It's really robust. And you can see Don Garlitz as a younger man, as a older man, and as what he is now. And he's there. You can see drag strips from all over the country. And I thought, within this world, it won't be that long until we can recreate those environments. I might ask you, Bill, the first NHRA race you ever went to, what was it?
I think the 80 Spring Nationals in Columbus was the first NHRA race I went to.
So the 80 Spring Nationals will have hundreds of photos from that race. And in that experience, in the background somewhere, again, the resolution won't be high enough, but you'll be there in one of those photos. And that experience with those images, with that footage, with that data, will we have an AI environment, some kind of goggle virtual reality world where not only could we talk about that, but you could go back there and you could see Garlitz there. You could run into Prudhomme there. And I like that idea of, could we recreate some of those experiences where you could take somebody back there, and all the stories that you would tell, you could have them experience with you. I think that that's likely to be possible. And again, NHRA has enough data that I think that could be an exciting future media form. When I came to NHRA, we would do license agreements, and there was a line that was always in it that this footage or this likeness would be licensed in perpetuity forever for both, for all media forms, both known and as of yet unknown. And I thought, I wonder what those could be. So I'm excited to see what media will become, go beyond conversation, beyond photos. Like something like that, it would become emotional. Like if you were to go back and relive it and re-remember it. And I think that would be likely, and I think you would enjoy it. And I think you would enjoy bringing somebody back to not just hear about the way it was, but to live it with you. So I'm excited for some of those possibilities. Within this world, again, we're quickly dicing up, and we'll go to Sonoma, where you'll take TV show footage to put it on the website. You'll take social media stuff that will end up on the TV show. Within the race, the further down we get into the stories about what the drag racing experience is, and use the tools of media to tell that story and share it. Matt Hartford at Epping got to the final round, I think against Dallas Glenn. Had a phenomenal race, just that Dallas Glenn had an absurdly competitive reaction time. And Matt Hartford, after that loss, which really isn't a loss, he's just so good, but then this absurdly better thing happened next to him. Matt was at a loss. He was a shell. He was heartbroken. And I was in his pit, and I thought, he has no armor against this. He's just going to answer any dumb question that I ask him, because I have that pulpit to do so and tell that story. And in it, I realized, Matt, I couldn't walk into Total Seal that you run every day. I couldn't get to you. But here, you can't hide from me. You're right here, and you're right here for everybody. And we're recording this, and we're talking about it. And I said, what do you do? What advice would you give somebody to resurrect from that kind of feeling? And he said, we're going to be racing again in 5 days. That's the only way to recover from it. And then he went on to win. So I like the idea of, at some point, we'll use the tools of media to tell those emotional stories, not just the statistical, not just the beauty, but, to see Matt, to be strong enough to handle that, and then take you with it so that you can feel what that's like. Because that's such a small, again, neither of them failed. Both of them won, just one of them won more. And to watch Matt feel through that, process it, and then not succumb to it, which I could understand the hero's journey in the story. It's too much. It broke him. Somehow he resurrected and came on back to succeed another day. So those are some of the things I'd like to be able to use some of the technology. And I think you have time for emotion. You might not have time to read. You might not have time to watch. Maybe I'm drawing on too long to listen. But at some point, I think you'll have time to feel it. Whether it's the engine, nitromethane starting up and launch, you got time for that. And that heartbreak to resurrection, to hero, to success. I'll be interested to see how we tell those emotional stories in the future.
Oh, what a great response. And there's so many cool things coming, but there's also some things that I'm troubled by in with the AI. And I'm a big AI guy, but I do IT during the day. And the challenge I'm seeing though, there's a half a dozen Jungle Pam Facebook sites, and none of them are authorized. And there's so many photos out there, like all the archives of Les Lovett and all the guys, the Kamal and Richard Shute, all these guys have taken this wonderful work and put it online. And they're very, very generous. Steve Reyes, very generous with us in sharing their work so that we can have this archive for folks. But I'm seeing like that work taken, animated via AI, and Jungle Pam's walking and talking and doing things she didn't do then. And a lot of these things are from folks overseas. I don't recognize any of the names. And it's really it's something that troubles me a bit, but I don't know how you fight it, because I don't think Facebook doesn't seem to really care about that. I've reported a few things and just say, wait a minute, this is not legit. And I think, and Pam Hardy yourself, known her since the early O's, really super, super sweet, awesome person, and so cool. But, she's like, what am I going to do? I mean, you could just spend all day long, trying to chase these folks down. But the thing is, and I talk with Brett Kepner about this a lot, and he and I and Burgess go way back, we're all about the same age. And the thing is, how do you get in front of it? The challenge is younger folks now will see that stuff and it's just frankly incorrect, right? That you'll so and so did what, and it looks really good and it looks really compelling. There's only a handful of us who know that that is factually wrong. And I'm troubled by that overall, but I think NHRA also, when they put something out good, you guys got the legit folks, the legit archives, and putting all that together. I just wonder how you sort of prevent folks from stealing that and popping it up as their own. I mean,
Well, you're teaching me as you're asking this question. I don't know this is an answer, but we're gonna work it out together. Maybe the solution is you take that theft, that stolen, that misinformation, and you displace it and say, let's do it correctly. So, in the case of, there's a famous piece of fraudulent footage you can see on the internet. It's what's his name? It's Bruce Lee.
Mhm.
It's Bruce Lee appearing to play ping pong with nunchucks.
Mhm.
And in it, it's so good that it's presented, and you would share it and think, look, have you seen this? And what it really is a Nokia cell phone commercial from the early 2000s, and it's all fake. It's filmed with an actor who looks like Bruce Lee, but you watch it and you think, how do I know that he couldn't play ping pong with nunchucks? And I always like that my mind would allow for. We think so highly of his capability that maybe he could have done that. We just don't have footage of it. In our world, in the last year, there was some discussion about Buster Couch, famous starter for NHRA, that the story went that at one point there was a driver at the starting line and Buster wanted him to shut off and the driver wouldn't shut off. So Buster picked up a fire extinguisher, took the nozzle, put it in the injector, and flooded the engine and shut it off, starved to shut it off. And wow, that I never met Buster, but I know enough of the story and the persona and the larger than life. I thought, we should write about that. whose car did he do that to? And this is a story that's circulating around in our office. And we start to look at it and then ask Burgess. He said, I know that story, but I don't think that happened. I don't know who he did it to. I would remember that. And so the guy that was perpetuating this story then had a shame fall over him. And it felt bad that he was propagating this thing that he didn't, where he heard. And I said, well, I think this is one of the challenges, like the Bruce Lee situation. I for people listening and watching that, it's not that Buster Couch wouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that he probably wasn't given the opportunity to do that. So I think the conundrum in our AI world is that there are people that some of those things, they didn't happen, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't have been true. And that's going to be a strange space for us to be in. Again, if we could do the math on that statement, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it isn't true. He just wasn't given that chance. So we probably, again, with Pam Hardy, the idea of, did she wear that? Did she do that? Did she start that? How, and it's not that she couldn't have. Again, she's phenomenal, right? She's brilliant. She's talented. She's all these things. So we could probably hang anything you thought on her, and it would be hard to distinguish what she did and didn't do. And maybe that becomes a motivation for us to tell those stories. Again, Don Garlitz. I'm not sure there's anything he couldn't do well. So you could make up a bunch of lies, and I don't know that I wouldn't believe them. So just telling the truth would be enough about him. And maybe that's the way we combat it, is we spend time telling those true stories, because they're already so unbelievable, but they did happen. Mm-hmm. And it is true. So I'll take that as a challenge, that there's an opportunity. Mickey Thompson, the guy, was basically capable of seemingly anything. And I don't know what you couldn't hang on him and it would stick. So if you just told a factual story to the best of your abilities, I think it would be enough. If you told a lie, I don't know how you would distinguish the difference between the two.
Well, we'll fix that one of these days. David, man, what a great conversation. We've literally gone twice the length of our typical broadcast, and I could do another hour, but I'm going to cut you loose tonight, and love to get you back on, because, oh my gosh, this has been a fantastic conversation. And
well,
we don't
super
go
pleased for the
deep.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Super
Well,
pleased.
any final thoughts you have for the fans out there? Or really, like, I'll do a shout out to we don't just have straight up fans, although I'd love to have some. All of our listeners are racers or something, there's somehow involved themselves. So you really got the insiders group here listening. And of course, whomever sees these eventually, we welcome you all. But what are your thoughts for the gang before we say farewell?
I think within this, there's an astrophysicist named Sarah Walker. There was a Sarah Walker that worked with NHRA. She's with Brainerd now, different astrophysicist, but same name. And she says that if you think about time and distance, mathematically, they're the same. We just think of distance as bigger, it gets bigger, in time, we think of it as it gets smaller and shorter. She said, but they're really the same. And through this 75 years, and even before with drag racing, the biggest thing about this is the time that's experienced. You went back to that spring nationals or winter nationals, mm-hmm. and all the places you ever went, all the experiences you ever had, those could all stay. It would be this massive structure. She used the term temporal structure. I realize temporal structure is a very scientific way to say story. Mm-hmm. And the thing I would realize, all of the stories that are in drag racing, all of those racers, every one of them has got a great story. They might not all have been told, but all of them have it. Think how massive those collections of stories are. And I would encourage everybody, first, I would say thank you to be given the opportunity to attempt to tell some of those stories. But I applaud people for creating those stories, because this is one of those places that it's a canvas to tell your story as a racer. And I want to thank them and encourage them to keep doing that. That is what the NHRA is supposed to be. It's a place to come and find out what you're capable of, find out in a safe and structured way that you can keep coming back. It's a sustainable thing. The next 75 years of NHRA, will be fascinating because as long as people want to know what they're capable of, it will continue forever. And I don't see that want ever ending. So I applaud that effort. Again, I appreciate this opportunity. The data, the story, that temporal structure, it's awesome. And I hope people enjoy watching this for decades to come.
You bet. Well, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, David Kennedy of the National Hot Rod Association, formerly of Hot Rod Magazine. What a pleasure talking to you tonight, sir. Have an awesome year, and I look forward to following along and seeing what you got going on next.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
All right, so great, folks. Let's say farewell to David, and we'll turn it over to John. John Bockelman, tell us what you got going on for your Racer of the Week and JB's Take.
Thanks, VP. You know, I've expanded my segment to include show cars now. And I've sent invites to 5 racers recently, and none of them responded. So, you know, I'm just kind of dead in the water without those guys, and I'm going to go with some show cars. Uh, this is the fascinating story of the Nifty 51 as told to me by Pat Brown. I will deliver this story word for word as Pat told it. The Nifty 51 came into my life more than 40 years ago. I purchased it from a family friend in the early 1980s while we were living in the Chicago area. At the time, it was powered by a Chevrolet 327 V8 backed by a 4-speed manual transmission with a Hurst shifter. It featured bucket seats, bright orange shag carpet, and the original wood interior that still remains in the car today. The wagon carried me through Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin before making the move to Utah in 1989. Back then, it wore a tan paint scheme with gold inserts. Chevrolet built only 23,586 Tinwoody wagons in 1951, and classic car historians estimate that only 100 to 200 remain registered today. When I bought the wagon in 1982, there were still approximately 800 registered, making its survival even more remarkable. The restoration began in the mid-1990s after I enrolled in welding classes and decided to tackle the bodywork myself. I repaired the rear fenders, completed the initial bodywork, and primed those areas. Most important than the work itself, I gained a tremendous appreciation for the craftsmen who make welding and bodywork look effortless. I later removed the entire wood interior, carefully refinished each piece, reinstalled it, and continued driving the wagon on and off for another 15 years while imagining what the Nifty 51 could someday become. That vision began taking shape in 2009. With plenty of help, the wagon was completely disassembled and rebuilt with a Chevrolet 350 small block engine, automatic transmission, Mustang 2 front suspension, tilt steering column, wood steering wheel, a new floor, and additional bodywork. Then, as so often happens, life intervened. The project sat unfinished for nearly 9 years. So in 2018, I realized that if the Nifty 51 is ever going to be completed, the time had finally come. Knowing I couldn't do it alone, I entrusted the project to Matt's Rods and Restorations in Salt Lake City. Matt and his crew transformed the wagon into the car I had envisioned for decades. They refined the bodywork, reassembled the car, and incorporated countless custom touches. Most of the chrome was removed to create a single seamless piece. I'm sorry. I got mixed up there. Most of the chrome was removed to create a cleaner, sleeker appearance, and the hood was welded into a single seamless piece. A new wiring harness was installed, and the wagon received blue dot taillights, electric windshield wipers, auto meter gauges, a pop-out gas cap, a new fuel tank, and many other thoughtful upgrades. The finishing touch was a stunning custom house of color citrus candy brandywine paint job. While candy brandywine is traditionally sprayed over black, silver, or gold, this version was applied over an orange base coat, creating the distinctive glow that makes the Nifty 51 instantly recognizable. For his very first wood graining project, Dustin Murch did an outstanding job hand painting the simulated wood grain on the exterior of the wagon and the glove box door. Scott Stratford installed vintage air, crafted a beautiful custom maple and mahogany headliner, added insulation and seat belts, and completed countless finishing details. Darrell Burton upholstered the bucket seats, installed the carpet and custom floor mats, and built the custom center console. To complete the look, I added chrome wheels wrapped in Continental tires, 17 inches up front and 18-inch in the rear, and lowered the wagon 2 inches for the perfect stance. The Nifty 51 officially debuted at the 2022 Salt Lake City Autorama. And during that show, I made a spontaneous decision that would become my favorite part of owning the car. I began inviting people to sign it. Today, thousands of signatures cover the inside of the tailgate, the engine compartment, and the door jambs. Each one represents a conversation, a memory, or the beginning of a friendship. The Nifty 51 has introduced me to incredible people, and hearing their stories has become one of the greatest rewards of this entire journey. Among those signatures are legendary custom car builder Gene Winfield, who immediately fell in love with the wagon, Steve Darnell of Welder Up, Dave Kindig and Kev Dog of Kindigat Designs, and renowned drag racing artist Kenny Youngblood, whom I had the privilege of chauffeuring around Salt Lake City in the Nifty 51 during one of his visits to Utah. One of my favorite memories happened completely by chance when I met Marie Osmond. She laughed and told me no one had ever asked her to sign a car before, and she was delighted to become a part of its story. There are still a couple of names I hope to add someday. Chip Fusey and Antron Brown have long been two of my automotive heroes, and having their signatures alongside the thousands of others would be a fitting continuation of the Nifty 51's journey. Everyone who signs the wagon receives a small woody model as a keepsake, and I always tell them they're now a part owner. They don't get the keys, but their name will forever be part of the Nifty 51. Those signatures represent people from every walk of life, friends and family, adults and children, veterans and active duty military members, police officers, firefighters, first responders, members of car and motorcycle clubs, and government officials. Every signature tells a story, captures a moment in time, and holds a special place in my heart. I treasure every single one. The Nifty 51 has been honored with numerous awards, including the first place at the 2022 Salt Lake Autorama, where it received the ISCA Best Interior Award. It returned to earn a first place again in 2023, 2024, and 2025, along with a second ISCA Best Interior Award. Although these awards are deeply appreciated, they represent the work of many talented people. Countless individuals contributed their skills, encouragement, and friendship throughout the project. I am especially grateful to my brother, Kerry Wayne, my nephew, Lucky Wayne, Bob Novosel, Brandon Peterson of BK Garage, Derek Diamond of Diamond's Hot Rod Garage, Kendall Thurkelson, and Don of Kendallized Customs, and so many others who have helped make this dream a reality. Jeff Dastrup, an exceptionally talented pinstripe artist, created the memorial artwork on the rear hatch window honoring dear friend and sweetheart Big Al Harding. Al helped me choose many of the parts used in the restoration and never stopped encouraging me to finish the project. His beloved companionship, along with his love and support of my family and many close friends, made this dream possible. The Nifty 51 was built to be driven, not hidden away. Since its completion, it has traveled hundreds of miles to car shows and events throughout Utah and Idaho, creating new memories everywhere it goes. One memory stands above all the rest. During the restoration, my brother-in-law Tom became seriously ill. I promised him that he would be my first passenger when this wagon was finished. Although he passed away just days before it was completed, my sister's permission gave me the approval of the mortuary, and I was able to keep that promise by taking Tom on his final ride. That moment forever changed what this wagon means to me. The Nifty 51 is far more than a restoration project. It is a tribute to Big Al's and Tom's memory, a promise kept, and a reminder that some journeys are measured not in miles, but in love. Today, my daughter Jerry and I also host a monthly gathering at Woody's Drive-In in Murray, Utah, from April through October. It has become one of our favorite traditions. It's a place where old friends reunite, new friendships begin, and people of every generation came together through a shared love of automobiles. My next great 51 adventure is already on the calendar. In September 2026, the Nifty 51 will make the trip from Utah to Chicago and back along historic Route 66. After everything this wagon and I have experienced together, I can't imagine a more fitting way to celebrate the journey. The Nifty 51 has never really been about trophies or recognition. It's about the people, the friendships, promises kept, the memories, and the miles still waiting to be driven. Pat, thank you for this great story. The Nifty 51 is truly an automotive work of art. We wish you good luck, safe driving, and the best of times in the future. Everybody stay safe and well. You are the most important part of this show, and we love you all. It's a great way to spend an hour together on a Monday night. And we'll see you all next week. God bless America. Back to you, BP.
Thank you, John. Wow, that was a really cool segment, and I'm looking forward to seeing more car show things. I think if we just do like bitchin' hot rods of one stripe or another, I think that would be perfect for your segment.
I really can't hear what you're saying, BP.
Can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you okay now.
Okay, so I'm scrunching up on the mic, but yeah, I think that was a great show, and for the show car of the week. And I mean, as long as we have bitchin' hot rods, I think no matter what, if they race them or they show them, I think that all works out for you.
Yeah, that's true. I had to think this thing over when I couldn't get a racer of the week, and I've talked about everything to do with me, my music career, my art career, everything else, my personal life. But yeah, I'll come up with a new format on this thing, and I'll try to keep it going as best I can.
Sounds great. Well, like David was saying earlier, we just keep incrementally getting better and better and changing as we need to. So sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's uh let's go on and talk about events and more. Drag Racing Live YouTube channel just over 180,000 views now, 831 subscribers. So we keep growing, aiming for 1,000 subscribers. That's our minimum. If we could magically move our 300,000 folks over from Facebook, that would be awesome, but we can't. So tell your friends, please subscribe, like the show, and appreciate everybody's support. Let's talk about upcoming guests. Next Monday night, Eiley Stafford returns. Last time we talked to Eiley, she was driving that wild rear-engined top alcohol funny car, or a top alcohol dragster. Wasn't quite top alcohol, but it was blown on alcohol. Now she's running a Nostalgia Nitro funny car and doing an amazing job. So I can't wait to chat with Eiley. We talked with her a little bit on Facebook today. Miss K sent her a little bit of love, and Eiley replied and said she can't wait to talk with us. So next Monday night, Eiley Stafford returns to Drag Racing Live. And then we go into a 3-week moratorium, folks. July 27th, August 3rd, August 10th. Denise and I will be traveling to the UK and to Ireland and to Scotland and finally to Norway for our big retirement celebration. My buddy Jason, my son's going to be holding down the fort here. So there won't be a show on those days. We'll take a little break. But then August 17th, we're going to start it up again. Miss Kay and I met this great couple down at the HPX convention in Charlotte. Steve and Brooke Foley, stock eliminator, super stock, Copo Camaro, and top dragster racers. What a great couple they are. And we're going to be chatting with them on August 17th. And then on August 24th, we're going to talk with Mel Roth of the Street Car Super Nationals. So if you like your door cars fast, we'll talk with Mel, who puts on that a great series and event. So Eiley Stafford next week, and then a couple weeks break, and then in mid-August we're going to start it all up again, and we'll head on into the sunset for the rest of the year. Let's talk about lost friends, folks. We have one to report this week. There's a few other names I may have, but unfortunately, the place I usually send them, I noticed that our rest in peace to former drag racers page was a group. It was down on Facebook today, and I hope that those good fine folks are okay. I hope that page returns because it really was a great place and a great service to remember these awesome racers. But one I will note that Chuck Poole passed away on July 6th in Hawaii. He was 91 years old, one of the best wheel stander racers of all time, Mr. Chuckwagon. Chuck Poole passing away on July 6th. Our condolences to his family and many, many friends. And thanks for the thrills over the years, Chuck. With that, we'll wrap up our special 2-hour conversation with David Kennedy. What a great show, John. Your thoughts on this long evening tonight?
It was a great interview. And, we were having one of the top guys at NHRA with us tonight, which is a great privilege as far as I'm concerned. And I also want to wish a very happy birthday to your wife, Denise.
Thank you.
And I saw that it was her birthday today, and I hope y'all had a great day with her.
We did. We happy birthday to Denise. She was terrific. We went and had Indian food at a brand new restaurant in town here called Bollywood Masala, which was super fun and it was delicious. And we came home and took a nice nap in the afternoon and shared a couple of gifts. So it was an awesome day. And
Great.
then got up just in time to get ready and do the show. So thank you, John. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Let's go ahead and do a wrap. And I really did enjoy talking to David Kennedy tonight. Wow, did we get philosophical and deep? And typical media guy, he was like trying to flip it around on me and make it about me a little bit and ask me some stuff, which I love. I can talk about myself all night long. But it was really awesome talking with him, and what really interesting insights from David. I can't wait to go back and listen to this show again. I want to thank David for coming on. John Bachman, thank you, brother, for all you do. Kate Turkelson, doing great. By the way, just a little shout out to Kay for all the live video she puts up from the tracks. Kay and I spent some time on Saturday going through the AI tool we use to create the little shorts and clips. And so look out, guys and gals, you're going to get inundated because Kate Turkelson is going to start taking some of her great work that she does in long form at the tracks and create clips out of them and start saving them up here on YouTube and all our social media platforms. So lovely to see you the other day, Kay, even though it was online, face to face, but really looking forward to seeing some of that cool stuff coming up. Speaking of social media and clips, we also want to thank Sophia Roveda, Jeffrey Cormier, and Uriel Yamashiro, our three amazing interns who are doing such great work getting our clips built and sent out to all of our social media. I want to thank Pete Moriello, Rob McCabe, David Oakes, Bill Kloss, Mel Bashir, Ron Toombs, John Mernon II, and Dave Weslowski. Of course, thanks to Jeff Gilder, who got us our start way back in 2010. Special shout out to Nitro Alley. And thanks in heaven to Danny White, the big man, who built, I see his name every day as I go back and re-edit old entries, and what great work he did for us, for the sport and for us over so many years. And what just a great guy to hang out with, too. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. It was really great to see all the good commenting on the chat line. I'm glad to see everybody out there having a good time. Check in on Dregless.com every day to see what's new. We put up something every single day. You can find us also on the Radio Bob Network. And finally, let me say farewell. But next Monday night, please join us again for Eiley Stafford. I can't wait to talk with her about running that big, bad Nitro Nostalgia Camaro funny car. Until then, folks, on behalf of Giant and John and the rest of the gang, my name's Bill. Have an awesome week.